There is something empaths refuse to look at. Something they push down so deep that even acknowledging its existence feels like a betrayal of who they believe themselves to be. Something dark that lives inside them that contradicts every story they have told about their nature. Empaths have a shadow. And it is not what you think. Carl Jung spent his life teaching that every person has a shadow. The parts of ourselves we cannot face. The qualities we reject. The aspects of our personality that do not fit the image we want to project. And he warned that the shadow does not disappear when we deny it. It grows stronger, more dangerous, more likely to control us in ways we cannot see. But empaths believe they are different. They believe their capacity to feel deeply, to care genuinely, to love unconditionally, somehow exempts them from having the darker aspects Jung described. They look at their empathy and think it proves they are good. That their sensitivity is evidence they are incapable of the cruelty other people possess. This belief is the lie that keeps empaths trapped. Because you do have a shadow. And your refusal to acknowledge it is destroying you in ways you cannot see. You have felt it before. That flash of something ugly that rises in you when someone takes advantage of your kindness one too many times. That cold satisfaction when someone who hurt you finally suffers consequences. That part of you that wants revenge even though you tell yourself you are above such feelings. That moment when you realize you are capable of cruelty, and it terrifies you so much you immediately bury it again. These moments are your shadow trying to emerge. Trying to be seen. Trying to be integrated. But you push them down because acknowledging them feels like admitting you are not who you think you are. Jung would tell you that this is exactly the problem. You are not who you think you are. No one is. We are all far more complex, far more contradictory, far more capable of darkness than our conscious mind wants to admit. And empaths, despite their belief in their own goodness, are no exception. The shadow of the empath is particularly dangerous because it is particularly denied. You have built your entire identity around being good, around caring, around feeling deeply for others, around being the person who understands when no one else does, around being morally superior to people who do not have your capacity for empathy. And this identity leaves no room for the darkness you actually possess. But that darkness exists whether you acknowledge it or not. It lives in every moment you felt superior to less empathetic people. In every instance you judge someone for not caring as much as you do. In every time you used your empathy as proof that you are better than others. In every relationship where you played the martyr and secretly enjoyed the role. This is the shadow empaths are afraid to admit they have. Not cruelty in the obvious sense, but superiority disguised as sensitivity. Judgment disguised as understanding. Manipulation disguised as care. Control disguised as helping. You have done this. You have felt morally superior because of your empathy. You have judged people for being less sensitive than you. You have used your ability to feel deeply as evidence that you are more evolved. You have held your capacity for understanding over people who do not have it. You have made people feel guilty for not reciprocating the level of care you provide. And you have told yourself this is not manipulation. This is not control. This is just you being hurt that people do not appreciate what you give. But Jung would see through this immediately. He would see the shadow operating beneath the performance of pure empathy. The empath's shadow includes the parts of themselves they most deny. The capacity for coldness they pretend does not exist. The ability to manipulate through vulnerability they refuse to acknowledge. The desire for control disguised as caring. The need to be needed that drives relationships they call love. The superiority complex hidden behind the label of sensitivity. These qualities do not make you evil. They make you human. But your refusal to see them makes them dangerous. Because what you do not acknowledge, you cannot control. What you do not integrate controls you. You have been controlled by your shadow for years without knowing it. Controlled by the need to be the good one. The understanding one. The one who never gets angry or selfish or mean. This need has driven you into relationships where you had to perform endless empathy to maintain your identity. Where you had to keep giving to prove you were good. Where you had to keep absorbing pain to maintain the story that you are different from people who cause pain. But you are not different. You are capable of causing pain too. You have caused pain by staying in relationships where your resentment poisoned everything while you pretended to be fine. By giving in ways that created obligation and guilt in the receiver. By making people feel like they could never measure up to your standard of care. By using your empathy as a weapon when it served you. This is the truth empaths run from. That their empathy is not pure. That it comes with shadow qualities they refuse to see. That their capacity to feel deeply includes the capacity to manipulate deeply. That their understanding of others includes judgment of others. That their care for people includes the need to control people. Jung taught that the shadow contains everything we judge in others but refuse to see in ourselves. The empath judges people who lack empathy, who do not care, who are selfish, who prioritize themselves, who set boundaries that inconvenience others, who say no without guilt. But these judgments reveal what lives in the empath's shadow. The desire to lack empathy sometimes, to not care, to be selfish, to prioritize themselves, to set boundaries, to say no. These qualities exist in you. You just deny them so completely that you have convinced yourself you are incapable of them. And this denial is costing you everything. Because you cannot set boundaries if you believe boundaries make you bad. You cannot prioritize yourself if you believe self-prioritization is selfish. You cannot say no without guilt if you believe saying no contradicts your nature as an empath. You cannot protect yourself if you believe self-protection means you have lost your empathy. Your denial of your shadow has trapped you in a prison of your own making. A prison where you must be endlessly empathetic, endlessly available, endlessly understanding, endlessly good. Because admitting you are anything less feels like admitting you are nothing at all. But Jung knew the truth. That wholeness comes from integration, not perfection. That you become whole not by denying your shadow but by acknowledging it. Not by pretending you are only light but by accepting you are both light and dark. Not by performing goodness but by being real. The empath who can admit their shadow is the empath who becomes free. Free to be selfish sometimes without believing it makes them a bad person. Free to set boundaries without guilt. Free to say no without shame. Free to be angry without believing anger contradicts their nature. Free to be human instead of performing an impossible standard of constant empathy. But most empaths never get there. Because admitting the shadow feels too dangerous. It feels like destroying the identity they have built. Like admitting they are not special. Like accepting they are just another flawed human trying to survive. And they would rather stay in denial than face that truth. Even if the denial is killing them. The shadow does not wait for permission to emerge. It finds other ways. Subtle ways. Ways the empath does not recognize as their own darkness because they have convinced themselves they are incapable of darkness. And this is when the shadow becomes most dangerous. When it operates without awareness. When it controls from the unconscious. Carl Jung warned that the shadow always emerges. Always. The only question is whether it emerges consciously, where you can work with it and integrate it, or unconsciously, where it controls you without your knowledge and destroys everything you think you are building. For empaths, the shadow emerges unconsciously in patterns they never name. In behaviors they never label as manipulation even though that is exactly what they are. In dynamics they never acknowledge as control even though control is what drives them. You have seen this in yourself even if you refuse to call it what it is. The way you keep score in relationships while pretending you do not keep score. The mental ledger where you track everything you have given and everything you have not received. The resentment that builds when the balance feels unequal. The passive-aggressive comments that slip out when you can no longer contain your anger at being taken for granted. This is your shadow operating. Not through conscious cruelty, but through unconscious manipulation. Through the guilt you make people feel for not reciprocating your care. Through the martyrdom you perform that makes others feel perpetually in your debt. Through the suffering you broadcast that obligates people to tend to you. Through the self-sacrifice you weaponize to control how people see you. Jung understood that the most dangerous shadow is the one we refuse to see. Because an acknowledged shadow can be integrated, can be worked with, can be transformed into something conscious and manageable. But an unacknowledged shadow operates in the dark, controlling your behavior in ways you cannot see and would not believe if someone told you. The empath's unacknowledged shadow creates patterns they swear they are not creating. They swear they are not manipulative. But they make people feel guilty for having boundaries with them. They swear they are not controlling. But they create dynamics where people feel obligated to give back at the level they give. They swear they are not judgmental. But they have a hierarchy in their mind where people who care like they do are good, and people who do not are bad. These patterns are shadow behaviors. But because they flow from your empathy, you do not recognize them as shadow. You think you are just being hurt. Just having legitimate feelings. Just responding to mistreatment. You do not see that you are also participating in the dynamic. Also contributing to the dysfunction. Also using your empathy in ways that serve your shadow needs. The shadow need that empaths refuse to admit is the need to be needed. Not just wanted. Needed. You tell yourself you care about people. But Jung would ask you to look deeper. To examine whether you care about them, or whether you care about being the person who cares about them. Whether you love them, or whether you love the role of being the one who loves them more. This distinction is everything. Because if you need to be needed, you will unconsciously create situations where people need you. You will be attracted to broken people not to heal them but because their brokenness makes you necessary. You will stay in dysfunctional relationships not because you cannot leave but because leaving would mean losing the identity you have built around being the person who stays. You will give not out of genuine generosity but out of the unconscious need to create debt. To make yourself indispensable. To ensure people cannot leave you because they owe you too much. This is not love. This is the shadow operating through the disguise of empathy. Jung taught that we must make the unconscious conscious or it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. Your fate has been to end up in relationships where you give everything and receive nothing. Where you are taken for granted. Where your empathy is exploited. You call this bad luck. Bad judgment. Attracting the wrong people. But what if it is not fate? What if it is your shadow orchestrating these dynamics because they serve shadow needs you refuse to acknowledge? What if you unconsciously seek out people who will take from you because their taking allows you to be the martyr? What if you stay with people who do not reciprocate because their lack of reciprocity proves you are the good one? This is the darkest truth about the empath's shadow. That some part of you needs the dysfunction you complain about. Because the dysfunction validates your identity as the empath who gives more, cares more, suffers more. Without it, who would you be? Just another person navigating relationships. Not special. Not superior. Not morally elevated by your capacity to endure. Your shadow knows this. Your shadow needs this. And your shadow will keep recreating these dynamics until you become conscious enough to see what you are doing. But seeing it requires admitting something that feels unbearable. That you are not just a victim of people who take advantage of empaths. You are an active participant in dynamics that allow you to maintain the identity you have built around being taken advantage of. That some part of you chooses these situations because they serve a purpose you are not willing to examine. Jung said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Accepting yourself completely means accepting that you have used your empathy manipulatively. That you have controlled people through care. That you have judged people for not being like you. That you have felt superior because of your sensitivity. That you have needed to be needed so badly that you built your life around people who needed you even when they destroyed you. This acceptance does not mean you are a bad person. It means you are a complete person. With light and shadow. With empathy and manipulation. With care and control. With genuine love and unconscious need. The integration of the shadow does not diminish your empathy. It makes your empathy real for the first time. Because empathy that flows from your shadow needs is not real empathy. It is transaction disguised as gift. It is control disguised as care. It is manipulation disguised as love. Real empathy comes from wholeness. From someone who has integrated their shadow and knows the difference between giving from fullness and giving from need. Between caring because they choose to and caring because their identity depends on it. Between love that is free and love that creates obligation. When you integrate your shadow, You can finally give without keeping score. Because you are not giving to maintain an identity or create debt. You can finally care without needing people to care back at the same level. Because your worth is not determined by how much you care. You can finally help people without needing them to stay broken. Because their healing no longer threatens your purpose. This is what becomes possible when empaths stop running from their shadow. When they admit that yes, they have manipulated through their empathy. Yes, they have felt superior. Yes, they have used their sensitivity as a weapon. Yes, they have needed to be needed in ways that kept them trapped in dysfunction. Jung believed that the gold is in the shadow. That what we most deny about ourselves contains our greatest potential. The empath's shadow contains the potential for boundaries, for self-protection, for healthy selfishness, for the ability to care without self-destruction, for love that does not require martyrdom. But you can only access that gold by acknowledging the shadow exists. By admitting you are capable of the darkness you have spent your life denying. By accepting that your empathy has a shadow side and that shadow side has been controlling you in ways you refuse to see. Most empaths never do this work. They live their entire lives in the prison of their own denied shadow. Repeating the same patterns. Attracting the same dynamics. Suffering in ways they call fate but is actually the shadow orchestrating situations that serve its needs. But you do not have to be most empaths. You can be the one who looks, who sees, who admits, who integrates. You can face your shadow and discover that it does not destroy you. It completes you. The empath with an integrated shadow is not less empathetic. They are more powerfully empathetic. Because their empathy is real, conscious, chosen. Not driven by unconscious needs or performed to maintain an identity, but genuinely offered from a place of wholeness. This empath can say no without guilt, can set boundaries without believing it makes them bad, can be selfish when selfishness is required, can walk away from people who do not reciprocate, can love without needing to be needed, can care without creating obligation, can give without keeping score. This is what Jung meant by individuation. Becoming whole by integrating all parts of yourself, including the parts you have spent your life denying, including the shadow you are afraid to admit you have. The question is whether you are brave enough to look, whether you are willing to admit that you are not just the light you have been performing, that you are also the shadow you have been denying, that you are both, and that being both is not a flaw. It is what makes you human, and accepting your humanity is the only way to be free. Your shadow is not your enemy. Your denial of your shadow is your enemy. The shadow itself is just aspects of yourself asking to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be integrated, to be allowed to exist without destroying you. Jung was right. The shadow contains gold. But you have to be willing to dig through the darkness to find it. You have to be willing to admit you have darkness to dig through in the first place. Most empaths refuse. They stay in denial. They keep suffering. They keep repeating patterns. They keep believing they are victims of their empathy when they are actually victims of their refusal to see that empathy has a shadow. But you can choose differently. You can look at your shadow. You can integrate it. You can become whole. And in that wholeness, you will discover what Jung promised. That the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. Not the performance of pure empathy, but the complex, contradictory, shadow-integrated human being you have always been beneath the denial. That person is worth meeting. Even if meeting them means admitting truths you have spent your life avoiding.